Recording in progress.
So, every appearance and every event are the mind's miraculous display. Every appearance and every event are the mind's miraculous display. I've always wondered why Yoshe Tsogyal called that retreat song, and I think I now understand why. In the last 4 weeks, I have done a virtual retreat with Mingyur Rinpoche on the Bardos. It took place over 4 days. The last day coincided with the first day of Lama Surya's in-person retreat in Malibu, but I was able to watch that last day later when I got home. So I did the 4-day Mingyur Rinpoche retreat, the 6-day or whatever it was Lama Surya residential retreat, and Carol and I just returned from a retreat with Anam Tupton near Princeton, New Jersey, and the subject was bodhicitta. It went from Thursday evening through Sunday mornings, through lunch on Sunday. And on the first day, when we got there, in his kind of opening remarks that evening, he, of course, talked about bodhicitta, but he very much emphasized bodhicitta, practicing bodhicitta among us at the retreat. And I think he was recognizing that people sometimes go through emotional turmoil in retreats and maybe have thoughts about each other, even in silence. And he was really emphasizing that we need to be kind to each other. And he ended with the comment that he thought the main thing was to trust each other in the Sangha. And as we got up from that, Carol and I stood up, and we were, the silence began the next morning, Friday morning, and lasted till just before breakfast on Sunday. So as we got up and we were still talking, there were a couple of women young women behind us, and I'm going to call them Indian women. I'm referring to East India, not American Indians. And I recognize that they may be of Indian background, of Pakistani background, of Bangladeshi background, that they're definitely Americans, but for convenience sake, to keep this short, I'm going to refer to them as Indian women as we go along. And one of them, a young woman who I took to be in her 20s, named Shilpa, and I am terrible at names and faces. If I ever run into you in some other context and you're not in one of these squares, forgive me if you have to explain who the hell you are. So anyway, she introduced herself very outgoing and friendly, and name is Shilpa. And we introduced ourselves. She introduced another young woman who was there in that row with her. And the next day was Friday. The silence began. And Anam Tupton's retreats, this one and maybe all of them, it was very jam-packed. It was meditate, teaching, with just usually 15 minutes between each segment, except for the meals. the meal time. And even in the meal time, we had a little extra time, but not a whole bunch. So it was pretty jam-packed. But there was, after a meditation in the morning, there was a 15-minute break before the teaching. And that break started at 10:15. About 10:20, I was in the meditation hall still, or I had returned to it, and the earthquake happened. It was 4.8 on the Richter scale, which would mean hardly an eyebrow raised to some of you in coastal California. But it was 4.8, and we were only about 12 miles from the epicenter. I mean, there were articles in the New York Times about how buildings shook in New York, and New York is 50 miles east. We were 12 miles south. And so, nothing, there were no fissures in the earth, no dishes fell off the shelves, but it was substantial, and I'd say lasted about maybe 15 seconds or so. And the young women in the row behind us were not there at that time. Later that afternoon, there was an aftershock that was noticeable. And then in the evening, at dinner time, dinner started at 5:30. So this was maybe 5:35, 5:40. There weren't many people in the dining hall yet. There was a tiny aftershock. I mean, hardly noticeable. And the group of Indian young women who were a couple tables away from me, and one of them got hysterical, started to cry, and was really out loud crying. And part of my, somehow in my aging, it's become more frequent for me. I have some, maybe a neurological thing, but when I am emotionally shocked, taken by surprise, I laugh. And so she was crying hysterically, and I started laughing hysterically. And I couldn't shift to empathize with her. And people were coming and rubbing her back, and that was Shilpa, the woman who had introduced herself to us. And I wanted to do something, but I felt hopeless, so because I couldn't get the smile off my face. So I didn't do anything, but it sunk me into deep despair. And I started to think about Anam Tupton's instructions about being kind to each other and trusting each other. And I thought about the Chod retreat that we had done virtually with him, where you face your demons and do what's hard, and all of the rest of the teachings about loving kindness, and so that evening, and when we got in for the evening sessions, I think there were 3 Indian women in that row, including one I took to be maybe Shilpa's mother. She was a little older, and they didn't make eye contact with me, and I'm thinking, oh, they saw me laugh, and I feel so horrible. And so when I got back to the room Carol and I were staying in, I had this notebook, a kind of permanent notebook that I make notes in of spiritual development. And I wanted nice paper to write on, and I ripped out a page from the book, and I wrote this, outpouring of apology, and explained, that I just, have something that's gotten worse as I'm aging, and I have some cognitive issues, and I laugh when startled emotionally, and I recognize I hadn't even thought about this until after dinner, but I made the connection of Indian subcontinent and earthquakes, and thought, maybe this person has a personal history or a family history of tragedy, and this is triggering for her. So I wrote this real heartfelt note addressed to Shilpa and friends, just because I hadn't seen her again. I thought maybe she was so upset she left the retreat. So, and I didn't know whether she was upset by the earthquake or upset at my laughing. So I wrote this note, and the next morning I turned around to the row behind me, and the woman I took to be Shilpa's mother was there, or an older woman, 50-ish, 60 or so. And I handed her the note, and I think that was a meditation session, and we meditated, and then as we stood up, she hugged me. So that started me feeling better. And then I'll just jump ahead to the final breakfast. Now we can talk at breakfast. And she came up to me, that woman, and she said, about your note, I really feel I have to tell you, I have no idea what you were talking about. I wasn't aware of that incident. And I said, well, wasn't there a woman with you, a young woman? I think her name was Shilpa, and I haven't seen her again. And she was crying hysterically, and she said, I'm Shilpa. So the young woman I thought was in her 20s was actually in her 50s. And she said, well, when that last little tremor hit, yeah, I did sob a little bit. She said earlier in the day, in the big one, I had cried out, or some vocalization. And she said, I didn't get hysterical. She said, I said, well, people came and they were rubbing your back and they were all around you. She said, yeah, I think they were worried I was going to scream again. And then as we walked away, she turned back and came over to me and said, and by the way, you can laugh at me anytime you want. So, every appearance and every event are the mind's miraculous display.
Excuse me if I have frogs in my throat this morning. Every appearance and every event are the mind's miraculous display. In the spacious expanse, I see nothing to fear. It is just reflexive radiance of mind's clear light and nothing else. Hence there's no reason to react. All activity is my adornment. Therefore better to rest peacefully in contemplative evenness.
Excuse me for a moment as I stop the recording.